Hello, my name is Hadley. I'm an archaeologist working for Oxford Cotswold Archaeology, and we're here on the outskirts of Wickham Market because Sizewell are building a brand new park and ride right here off the A12, which you may be able to hear in the background. The A12 is a Roman road, and when they were turning it into a dual carriageway in the 1970s, they conducted a huge archaeological dig, discovering a Roman settlement over there. We're excavating here a bit far away from the settlement, but that's really interesting because it means that we can get the periphery of the settlement and look at the interface between the people who lived in the rural countryside and the people who lived in the urban town. The excavations they conducted in the 1970s revealed that the settlement was occupied from the late Iron Age period all the way to the late occupation of Roman Britain. It was a settlement for the entirety of the Roman period, which is really interesting because what we're finding on this site is archaeology to match. We've got archaeology all the way from the late Iron Age to the late Roman period as well, showing that this area was continually occupied just as much as the Roman settlement was. During our excavations, we're finding the highest concentration of Roman archaeology is on the western end of the site, which is what we expected because that's where the Roman settlement is nearest. As we're heading east, excavating more and more, we're finding less and less Roman occupation, which again makes a lot of sense because we're going from the interface between the urban and the rural all the way into the Roman countryside, where they would have done less things that disturb the ground, digging less ditches and pits. We've been finding all sorts of Roman goodies. We've got huge Roman boundary ditches that run parallel to the old Roman road. We have horse burials, we have butchery pits filled with horse skeletons. At least 3 horses have been butchered and chucked in a hastily dug pit. We don't really know if the people who did this were eating the animals yet, but when we send these horse bones back to the lab, our animal bone specialist will be able to analyse these bones and tell us a bit more about how they were butchered, how they were chopped. Sometimes you can see knife marks on the bones, which suggests that they were used for food or other such purposes. This horse that you can see here was clearly the prize stallion of someone from the Roman or Iron Age period. And most interestingly, I think, we have a number of burials. There aren't quite enough burials here for it to be the cemetery for the Roman town. We're looking on the outskirts. Maybe these were the outcasts of society, but it's actually really hard to tell at this stage in the excavation. Now, at one point in the Roman occupation of this area, there was a massive colluvium event, a hill wash from that hill over there. We're in Suffolk, so it's not really a proper hill. It's a tiny one. But this completely changed the landscape, filled in all the boundary ditches, and some of the boundaries had to change, which is why we have so many recuts of these agricultural ditches here on site. Before the Romans came here, the Iron Age people were doing just fine, and they dug a ditch about halfway through the site on the western side of our excavations. This is possibly the most interesting feature on site, not because of what it is, it's a boring boundary ditch, but because of what's actually in it. We had a handful of silver Celtic coins, a couple of bronze Celtic coins, and most interestingly, I think, 3 Roman brooches. These coins and the brooches date to around about the time of the Roman conquest. So we don't really know why all these things ended up in this ditch, but something interesting must have happened around about the time that Roman legions were right here in Wickham Market. So although we haven't found any evidence of domestic structures here on our excavations, we've found plenty of artifacts which hint at domestic activity and of everyday life. Here are a few of my favourite finds that we've discovered on this excavation. We have found plenty of brooches here at Wickham Market, but the most interesting by far, I think, is this silvered fish brooch. It was made of a copper alloy, probably bronze, and then was covered in silver, and the detail is simply incredible. You see the gap where the eye would have been, well, that was filled with enamel. It would have been a really interesting piece in the day and look even better than it did now. You see on the reverse there, that's where the poor Roman wearer lost it because the pin broke and it fell off into the colluvium deposit and he lost it forever. These brooches are associated with the 1st century AD and mainly with the Roman army. So it's very possible that this was worn by a Roman soldier, although of course we can never tell for certain. We also find things like Roman tweezers. These were made of bronze and they would have had a little keychain on the bottom to attach to your person. The Romans cared a lot about their hygiene. They would have used this for the exact same thing that we use tweezers for today. It's a really interesting slice of everyday Roman life. Aside from the everyday items that people would have carried around with them, we have a really special find here in this Roman box seal. I'm sure most of us are aware of wax writing tablets, the things that the Romans used to scratch their messages in. When officials used these messages, they would close them, wrap them in twine, and then they would have to seal it with their official signet ring. Now, you can't just do it on the wax tablet, you needed something a bit more official. So you'd grab all the twine and you'd tie a knot in this box seal, which is made of copper. You'd have poured a bit of wax on it and then imprinted your signet onto it to seal it. We can't know for certain why this seal ended up on our site here at Wickham Market, but it's very possible that an official message was sent along the A12, was either lost on the way or the box seal perhaps broke, which is a very interesting insight into how the Romans governed this province.